Hey everybody, welcome back to Publishing Disrupted. I am editor Mick Silva.
And I am literary agent and publisher David Morris.
And we are talking about all of the lovely disruptions in publishing that are going on today, both in the traditional market, but also the independent. David and I have recently made some shifts professionally into the independent book market. So we like to discuss all those manner of issues.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're looking for, that's what you're going to get. So what do you want to discuss today?
I really have no idea. We haven't really prepared anything. We didn't think to invite anybody on.
I know. We should just ask someone to come in.
It's not true.
Actually, we do. We have a guest here today.
Who's a neighbor?
A neighbor. Right.
Yeah.
Actually lives in Grand Rapids, so that's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
I could have walked up here. No, I'm just a mile up Bailey.
Yeah.
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 Oh, man.
Yeah.
He bikes sometimes. David does.
Yeah. It's got to warm up.
If it's warmer.
Yeah.
I hope you can do that again. But
so
that's
we are
the lovely part about
joined by
Mr. Robert Bob Hudson.
Yay.
Is here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We're in the library studio here, so Bob's joining us, and we were figuring out the mics beforehand, and of course we have no computer today, so we're just we're kind of on a shoestring, but we're figuring it out.
That's disruption right there.
That's exactly right.
We're rolling with it.
It's the metaphor for the larger industry. Yeah. But no, in terms of what we want to discuss, we already have discussed a few things before we started recording, but we wanted to save the best stuff for when we actually hit record. And Bob, just first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you for asking me.
I would love a quick overview of your publishing career, if you can do that for us.
I started as a freelance editor and proofreader. I worked for the University of North Carolina for a while and Donley in Chicago. R.H. Donley, by the way, not
right.
R.R. Donley. R.H. was the airlines guides people. So I had the fortunate task of proofreading the airline guides. That was a lot of fun. And the mobile guide, too,
That's
by the way.
So cool.
Then was hired by Zondervan. I spent 35 years at Zondervan as a production editor, which involved a little bit of everything, both a little acquisition, a little line editing, a little content editing. And retired in 2018. My wife and I really, since we were married in 1984, we have operated a small chapbook press. We've done several dozen books, chapbooks. We just registered with the state as an official business this week.
Oh, wow.
So we are a doing business as, and we had to set up a business bank account and set up a tax framework with the state government. So that's exciting, and I brought some samples
got books
of
here.
what we've got going there, and that's been fun. A lot of people assume that I've been doing a lot of writing since I retired, and that's not necessarily true because I was doing a lot of writing while I was editing and just never worked very hard at publishing it. Yeah. So it looked like there was a whole mass of things that came out as soon as I retired.
It did. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I would be one of those people that assumed that.
That's contributed a lot to it. I mean, I've had a lot more time. I've done 16 books, and that's counting a couple of revisions of old books. My Art of the Almost Said, which is a book about writing poetry, was just reprinted.
With which publisher?
With Credo Communications.
Okay.
Yep, another local press.
Right. And Zondervan is also doing the updated revision of the Christian Writer's Manual of Style. That'll be the 5th edition now.
Yeah, let's keep on what your bibliography is, but I just want to pause on that for a second. Bob, you're probably the only person like a person who has produced a major style guide for a literary culture or community in the Christian Writer's Manual of Style. I have the 4th edition here in front of me because there's like Turabian, that's like older, much I don't, there are things like Roget's Thesaurus, and that those people aren't around. But you're like somebody who is really like you spent a lifetime on editing And then also proactively gathering what you know and researching things and compiling things, and probably had 1 million people give you advice on this as it was originally created, but as time has gone on as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty badass.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to give, I only edited 4 of the 5 editions of this. Jim Ruark originally put together a very small
Right.
Zondervan manual.
Oh,
of
it was
style.
Jim. See, we know Jim too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Original.
And I think his was 50, 60 pages long.
Right.
Okay.
And then I was asked if I wanted to take it over, and I was thrilled to do that.
And now it's over 600 pages. So.
And now it's over 600.
There's
The
a
next
lot. There's
the
a
next
lot.
one is going to be in smaller print, so it's not
Wow.
going to run quite 600 pages.
Okay.
I was flabbergasted by what large print they had in this
Yeah.
edition,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
wasn't going to complain.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did start back when I was working at UNC for their printing department.
Okay.
I was starting to compile style rules. Well, first of all, when I first freelanced in Chicago, I worked for a freelance agency in Elmhurst outside of Chicago. I started on a Friday. The boss handed me was then 10th edition, I think, of the Chicago Manual of Style. And he said, "Here, I want you to memorize this by Monday."
And there's no person or name behind the Chicago manual.
It's a staff.
It's
Yeah.
a large.
Yeah.
But you're the staff in this case,
Exactly.
with a lot of people helping you, obviously.
So as I edited and proofread, every time I ran across a conundrum or something that I thought was going to trip up a proofreader or an editor somewhere, I would jot it down. That went into high gear when I worked for Zondervan. So I started collecting stuff, and then especially after I was asked to do the revised edition of Jim's original, I just started collecting everything I could. Yeah, and asking advice of everybody I could.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. All right. So I derailed you a little. You were talking about the books that you've published, and you had some written while you were still working full time.
yeah.
You said you did a little editing, a little bit of proofreading, but you were doing a lot, and you were managing other people doing it
Right.
as well.
Right.
I hate to say it, but this is one of the disruptions of publishing. Anybody who does a little bit of writing and works as an editor, about 9 times out of 10, this is no disparagement to any of the authors I worked with, 9 times out of 10 I would say, I could have written this book so much better than this, or I would never have taken this tack, or I never would have done it quite this way. Right. And I didn't want to. Sometimes you impose yourself on the author and say, you could really do it this way. Other times you know that's just going too far.
Mm-hmm.
There are some authors, and I could name names, but there are some authors that I
And
know.
you know some names,
Yes.
too. We'll just leave them
We've
unsaid
been careful
for now.
not
But
to.
Well, I
you've
will-
worked with some pretty well-known names.
I'll mention Philip Yancey. There's the one in 100 authors where I go, this guy is 100 times the writer than I will ever be an editor. This guy knows how to handle a sentence better than I will ever know. And I was fortunate enough to work with a few of those.
Yeah.
So you get both, and
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah.
But the disruption is just being frustrated with authors. Some of the big names you can't rewrite. Some of the lesser names, you would go ahead and almost ghostwrite their book for them. So.
Well, and it's a question of the return of effort, right. on some
Mm.
of these books.
Yeah.
With the independent press, I think has a bad image for that largely that reason, in my assumption as an editor, that the quality level of the author writing the material tends to be lower than the traditional market. I think that probably still holds for the most part, but the quality level of traditional publishing has declined as well. And in terms of just the, I guess, celebrity publishing, and we've talked about this effect a couple of times, but having a book like yours, it's a Christian writer's manual of style. Now it's going to the Christian audience, but it's the standard in terms of what I still use as an independent, editor for people, whether they're publishing traditional or independent. And I think many editors, that's the case.
Yeah, it's a disciplined resource. There's a lot of people in religious publishing that will cap pronouns for deities and cap this and do this and do that, and you're like, no. In a lot of situations, it's like, no, that's okay. You can do it there.
Right.
But generally speaking, even as a religious publisher, there is actually a system to follow,
Right.
not just folk style editing.
Yeah, Yeah, only two of the best-selling Bibles kept the deity pronoun. The King James never kept the deity pronoun.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The
See,
NIV
people
never
don't-
kept the pronoun.
Yeah.
The NIV doesn't
Or
either.
NIV.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and yet people will die on that
Yeah.
hill so often.
Yeah.
And of
But-
course, Wycliffe didn't capitalize the word God.
Yeah. Right.
There you go, folks.
There's a whole discussion about that one. Definitely.
We could have an
Yeah.
entire. I just feel like people need to know this.
Yeah.
You know, with the
Right.
English language and the rules. I mean, there's so many that as personally as an editor that I get annoyed with. But if I knew the history of it and I recognized that this is a new argument, it's a new phenomenon to say, cap the deity and stuff.
Well,
We wouldn't argue.
if I can insert this, I probably got more hate mail about the capitalization of the deity pronoun than any other issue. And I would receive people denouncing me with the curses of Revelation.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Seriously.
Not
and so
surprising, but amazing.
I have this image that when I stand before St. Peter at the gate, he's going to say, Bob, you did so much. We're so proud of you. You did so much for the kingdom, but I'm afraid we're going to have to send you to that other place because you lowercase the deity pronoun.
Or just a few
That
months
sounds
in
like
purgatory, maybe.
Sounds like a Pascal's wager kind of thing. Like I needed to
man.
believe. I should have just believed.
I should have just capped it.
Yep.
Just in case.
Okay, but you're a person of many talents. You're a big, and we've had this in common too. Folk music.
Mm-hmm.
You're a fiddle player and a penny whistle player
Wow.
and a contradance band performer.
I play in a southern old-time string band. I play fiddle. My wife plays banjo for a band called Gooder Than Grits.
Yeah, perfect.
That's amazing.
And you're a big Dylan fan.
Gonna see him Thursday night.
Oh,
He's here in town.
I knew he was coming.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, you didn't get in fast
late.
enough, see?
I don't know if I want to
Yeah.
spring for a $300 ticket.
They still have tickets available.
Wow, that's
That's
fantastic. But that's not the first time for you to see Dylan.
Probably somewhere in the 30s, I think.
Wow. And then I have a copy of your book from Erdman's called The Monk's Record Player, which is a story about Thomas Merton and the perilous summer of 1966 when he was also spinning Dylan records there at the Gethsemane.
In the Hermitage, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jacques Maritain, the great French Catholic theologian, came to visit Merton, and what did Merton do? He sat him down and made him listen to Bringing It All Back Home.
Wow.
It's perfect. It's what you do. Come on.
So you're a Merton you're a Merton aficionado. You're a big Lewis, yes, Lewis.
Not as much on C.S.
Expert.
Lewis, but I love Lewis.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I go through phases. I mean,
Yeah,
my
we all
whole
do.
life is just who I'm interested in now. I've not been reading Merton. I was part of the West Michigan Merton Society for a while and enjoyed that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that book, you mentioned it, by the way, I worried that the Dylan freaks were going to come back at me hard over facts and small details.
Like capitalizing pronouns for
Right.
deities.
How could you be stupid enough to think that so and so is in that session for recording?
There's fundamentalists
Roland?
everywhere.
That's- Yeah,
There sure are.
but it wasn't.
They were kinder.
The Dylan folks were great. They
Yeah.
gave me
That's
good
good.
reviews. It was the Merton folks that went after me.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, hammer and tongs. They were after me.
Interesting.
wow.
So, and there were some legitimate details that I missed.
Yeah.
And anybody does that does
Yeah.
history or biography.
Yeah, there's a lot to know.
Yeah.
But they were merciless.
Wow.
So I lost a little bit of interest in Merton at that.
Sure. Well, the followers tend to help people, or don't help
right.
people. They're going to learn pretty quickly that there's a lot of people who consider themselves part of the in crowd.
It's what we used to call Faustian passion. That's my territory.
right.
That's
Yeah.
not your territory.
Right.
You're not invited in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I mean, we hit on a lot of different themes in publishing disruptions, but the independent market, I mean, ideally is a bit punk in my mind, right? Punk being that it's independent. It's intentionally not joining the crowd, not joining the group. And I mean, there's even pitfalls in doing that as well, holding that as an ethic.
Right. Pushing against boundaries.
Right.
Not staying in the box.
That can cause some disruptions of its own.
Yeah.
Right. We do need to have some sort. And I'm not arguing for traditionalism or establishment thinking. I'm just mainly trying to point out that there's fundamentalists everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're fundamentalist punks.
Gatekeepers.
And yet you follow your interests. And I think just to pick up on a thread that like this, it seems obscure. It seems even somewhat obtuse, right? To make the connections that you're making. And yet what really appeals to me about you and the work that you've done is that you dig down into your, could we call them hyperfixations? You said phases.
Sure.
And go ahead and follow that curiosity. Is that fair?
That is fair.
Yeah.
I proudly am a generalist.
Mm-hmm.
At my best, I'm, a mile wide and an inch deep. At my worst, I'm what you would call a dilettante. But
all of us are, right?
Yeah, I
At
know.
some point. Yeah.
I specialize a little bit in lots of things,
Yeah.
and I prefer it that way. I have friends. I have a good friend. One of my best friends he is a Cummings scholar.
Mm-hmm.
And is writing a major biography of Cummings, and
Wow.
he is brilliant guy. But that's his topic. That's
Yeah.
what he knows.
That's what he's decided.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where a lot of scholarship has led.
Sure.
I studied comparative literature in graduate school, and I think what I learned from that was that you can learn the basic English literature canon, the major authors, and how you would teach them in class.
Mm-hmm.
But in comparative literature, you're adding at least 2 other languages. You're spanning centuries, genres, sub-literatures, like Breton literature as it relates to major French literature, or Scottish and Irish literature as it relates to... And that gets really kaleidoscopic.
Right. Right.
It's you can't know everything, and that's what I loved about comparative literature.
Yeah.
Was that you had to
Endlessly
be humble.
interesting. Yeah. Had to be humble. There you go. I think you used the phrase. I feel as though independent publishing is an opportunity, at least for me on my side, and I get this from David somewhat too. It's an opportunity to be humbler than I was before with my publishing. And I tend to think that there's a lot of hubris involved and clout and relationships and who you know when it comes to the established traditional market.
Right.
And so I'm intentionally trying to get away from that more and more. I think I've called myself aggressively informal.
Yeah.
When it's talking about a conversation with someone, I love that. But if we're actually having to hit a lot of the expected talking points, even with a podcast like this, I feel like I want it to be free form. I don't like the idea of having a structure or necessarily, even hierarchies and things like this. And yet we, all of us in this room, have decidedly been part of a hierarchy, a traditional structure that says you learn these certain skills and you develop your skill in that area, and then you become an expert, and that's what you stand upon. Yeah. I can't argue for both things sometimes with my kids. It's very difficult because I'm trying to tell them why it matters to get a 4-year degree and then go on to graduate school. And does it still? I don't even know. Maybe it doesn't matter as much. Mm-hmm. But I will say, I think what matters is that you have taken your knowledge and dug down into it, based on the curiosity, the hyperfixations, the phases that you're allowing to be your motivation, your impulse to follow, right?
Yeah.
And that's worth something there.
And that creates like a smaller, but more engaged world for you, for the people around you, for the work that you're doing. I would love to talk about the disruption that you've experienced. And you were sharing something with me before we went on live here, and about how you were publishing books that you wanted to reach bigger audiences. Mm-hmm. This, I think, plays right off of what you've been saying, Mick, and what we were in recent podcasts we've been getting at this. You were publishing books to reach wider audiences, publishers that do that, like this Merton book. But then you discovered something, and you made a shift. Can you talk about that?
I can. Almost from the beginning, as long as literature has been around, publishing, or at least sharing literature, has been disruptive. That's almost been the point. You think of Ovid getting exiled to the Black Sea because of a poem. I would love to have written a poem that upset enough people that I would get expelled from
Yeah.
anywhere.
How much publishing like that goes on now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we talk about mainstream publishing. The disruptive thing about mainstream publishing is that it's not disruptive at all.
Interesting.
It's not generally. I mean, that's a generalization.
Yeah.
But it's not really pushing the boundaries like the independent publishers
So
are.
a lot of cultural derivative.
The early printers, whether you're thinking Wycliffe with translation or Gutenberg and Schaeffer with publishing the Bible, and these are disruptions that really echoed all across the world, or at least all across the Western world. And you think of the Japanese and the Chinese Zen poets who were rejecting society. They were disrupting the Confucian order because they.
Wow.
So that's kind of almost why you have to go to independent publishing.
Yeah.
Is because it is where we were talking too before about Apocryphal Books, who's one of the publishers of three of my books now. They are so on the edges of what's possible. I was just quoting a couple of titles to David. They've done a book called God on Psychedelics, which I've not read, but I love the title. And The Resurrection, a Gay Vision. So they're pushing the boundaries and upsetting people.
Yeah.
They don't get as much attention as a huge marketing department is going to give you, but they have that impact. So my disruption with major publishers, whom I loved working for, but and learned a lot from, is that they weren't willing to push the boundaries enough. And I could tell stories, but I'd better not. But instances where, books were brought. I can't tell one story. You may know Lilias Trotter, who was a major missionary in North Africa in the 1920s, was a disciple of John Ruskin's, almost married John Ruskin. She wrote a beautiful, beautiful book called The Way of the Sevenfold Secret.
Nice title.
Yeah, which Miriam Huffman-Rockness, who's one of the world's great Trotter scholars, she's done a documentary movie on Trotter. She brought me and said, would Zondervan be interested? And this was just before 9/11. There was a lot of interest in Muslim culture. Way of the Sevenfold Secret. Trotter wrote this for Muslims in Algeria at a time when it was death to be evangelizing Muslims in Algeria. She wrote this in the form of a Sufi mystical treatise, as if Rumi had written it, but explaining the Christian faith. It's basically, mere Christianity as Rumi would have written it.
Sure. Oh, that's
And it's a beautiful book. I brought it to Zondervan, and they said, no, that's too
too out there.
She's not well known enough, and it's too
Too
out
niche.
there.
Yeah.
After 9/11, I brought it back. I said, we have got to do this.
Yeah.
This is such a beautiful book. It's an important book. And again, I was rejected, but it was because...
Probably me doing the rejecting.
No, I don't think that... No, it was before you.
Oh, good. All right. That's
Before
right.
you got there.
9/11 was a long time ago.
You don't have to worry.
You would have seen it. So, but it was that kind of disappointment where they wouldn't do those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I was vilified at Zondervan a little bit because early on, you remember the book in black print? What is it? It was a book about publishing, but it basically said they did a research study that individual cowboy editors, they called them, did every bit as well in sales, just choosing books out of the blue
That they loved.
Yeah. They did as well in sales as a committee.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
And so I invented what I called the bonkers book, that every editor at least once a year should have the ability to bring in a crazy book out of the blue. The bonkers books worked for a couple of years, and then the hammer came down, and they said, no more bonkers books. Everything
I used up my blank check pretty quickly in most of the jobs that way. Yeah. Acquisitions is interesting because it did feel that way. It was very arbitrary. I worked as a bartender and wait staff at a restaurant in London for about 6 months while I was trying to get off some of the detritus of America in London.
Wow.
And it was great, but I learned that you can't predict what you're going to make that night because there's just no way to know who's going to come in the restaurant or what game's going to be playing that brings people in or not playing. And then you just don't, and it wasn't just games that were on TV. It was so many factors. And I think it was a good early lesson in the fact that you can't, especially as a retailer, you can't predict when people are going to buy, how many are going to buy, why they'll buy. And that's what we're trying to do in acquisition so often in publishing. It's this crapshoot. And everyone has to admit that they don't know how books sell. And ultimately, we're trying to tell people that we do as a publisher.
Yeah.
We go out and we say, we know how books sell because we have these bestsellers over here, so we're going to sell you too. And I just increasingly got really uncomfortable trying to make that, I guess it's a Pascal's wager in a way too. It's like you offer them one thing and then sleight of hand and give them something else. And it's just, it feels dishonest at a certain point.
Yeah. The other disruption was, as you both saw in your time at publishers, was just the increasing pressure to publish celebrities who sometimes don't even really have a very good story in them. Mm-hmm. Or now it's become, unless you have a major online presence, a podcast or a blog or a Substack or something that's just catching thousands and thousands of, you're not going to get a book entry. And then the editor's faced with, okay, I've got these 50 Substack writings that I'm supposed to turn into a book for this writer, for this Substacker. And that becomes a major headache.
Yeah.
And those are kind of who's getting published, at least making the best-selling seller list, aside from your fiction writers.
In religious publishing, it was like 20 years ago, it was working with sermon manuscripts.
The sermons,
pastors,
hiring a freelancer to aggregate, to create to pull a bunch of sermons together, do the rewriting along a theme, hopefully.
Right.
And then you would end up having to edit it.
Right.
And that's actually doesn't happen quite as often as it used to.
No.
It still happens, but I don't think it doesn't lead the way.
Well, pastors don't have the kind of clout and platform
Yeah,
that
that's
they used
changed.
to.
That's
Exactly.
changed.
Your editorial committees are going to look at a pastor's collection and kind of roll their eyes, whereas a popular religious podcaster, they're going to go, "Oh, yeah, that sounds good."
Right.
Or Instagram influencer or whoever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even you, Bob, have had some experience with publishing, and then like publishing something really original, like this book. You said you published some other things, and you said they weren't selling as well. And then you decided, why am I doing it this way? Why am I pushing this way? And you started to go in a new direction.
The chapbook press.
Well, my agent has been very kind, so good, has persisted with me. I have wanted to make money for my agent more than to make money for myself, just because I've been pleased with what he's done. I thought my novel, The Beautiful Madness of Martin Bonham, was going to do that.
That came out
2020, late 23, but 24.
From
Apocryphile. That was the second book they did with me.
Say the title one more time, please.
The Beautiful Madness of Martin Bonham.
Okay.
I took it to the major 5.
We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
I had shown it to the major 5. I got a couple of editors from the Christian publishers that said, wow, this is original, this is creative, I love this is so funny, it's one of the funniest things I've read, but this is not the kind of thing our market is going to go for.
Right.
You're writing humor
Yeah.
with a spiritual twist, and that just
that's not good.
There's humor books.
There's no humor in religion
in the
sometimes.
fiction category.
But I was convinced that this was going to be the moneymaker for myself and my agent. And I couldn't find a publisher. Apocryphile was willing to take it because they are kind of out there. And John Mabry, the editor there, just loved it.
It's got a cool cover, as I recall.
It's got a fun cover.
Yeah.
And Brian Borger, of all people, at the 2024, he's the owner of Eighth Day Books, Byron Borger. He was, when he was giving his talk at the last festival at Calvin, I don't know if you caught that, he said publicly his favorite book of the year was The Beautiful Madness of Martin Bonham. And this is a guy who reads hundreds and hundreds of books. And of course, my table got swamped. I got sold out in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm going to have lots of copies of that.
Oh,
this year.
that's a good story.
Sometimes
So-
it takes a while for those books. I'll just
I
say
know,
sometimes it
but,
takes a while.
I'd still love that book. I'd love to write a sequel, but how do you write a sequel for a book that
Yeah.
the first volume didn't sell well?
Well, and that's one of the challenges.
Right.
It was a wonderful book. I read it. Carolyn McCready, our friend, read it as well and loved it. And we're editors. We see a lot of work.
But I will jump in and say that's a lot of indie fiction happens with publishing more than one book in a series these days.
Yeah, that's true.
So you published a new book,
Yeah.
you get new readers,
Yeah.
plus your old readers, but the new readers go, oh, there was a prequel to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if that newer book is a little more, let's say, commercial. I don't know
Yeah.
that term, but like genre, I guess, it would have some conventions of normal fiction in it. This one that I'm remembering had a lot of literary, a lot of references. You even said something in your note. Was it at the beginning or the end?
Well,
the style of fiction you're writing?
Yeah, the narrative, the narrator of the novel is a professor who doesn't know how goofy he is, and that's part of the humor. So a lot of his frustrations with life and literature come out in the footnotes. It's a novel with funny footnotes and endnotes at the end.
Is that autobiographical, Bob?
Some of it is.
He's goofy, but he doesn't know it.
This is oddly enough, it goes back to Zondervan.
We all are.
I love it.
I am as goofy as they come, but a lot of it does go back to my work in publishing because there's always a tension between the trade side and the academic side.
academic,
And so I was kind of playing on that this English professor has problems with this theology professor about how to love God. And that's where all the humor comes from. But I was really frustrated that these books weren't selling. And at this point, since I'm kind of regularly getting rejected by the major publishers anyway, I thought, why don't I just self-publish or POD publish a variety of ways, a variety of channels that I have, just the stuff that I love and the stuff that's really close to my heart.
Yay.
For instance, I'm right now, I've recently published, I've been working on a set of short stories in blank verse. Now, there's a huge market for blank verse poetry right now.
Of course.
Yes.
So explain what that is then.
Blank verse is the verse style, iambic pentameter that Milton wrote in. It's kind of has a long history in English literature. And it's very nice because it makes language flow, it makes language lilt, but it also doesn't become so obvious like rhymes. You're always straining for a rhyme at the end of the line, that kind of thing. So I'd planned a set of 4, and I got 2 done, and I got stuck on the third, so I decided just to go ahead and publish the first 2 in a volume a chapbook volume. This is from my own Percipri Press, called Sinners in a Glass Ball, 2 short stories in verse. And I'm now furiously working on the third volume, which has been fun.
What is a chapbook?
A chapbook is a single, if you know book publishing, it's a single signature. It's basically just pages folded together and stapled.
A signature in book publishing is
a chapbook.
so, but a signature traditionally was they would print on a wide press one piece of paper. Right.
Fold and cut. And it would be anywhere from 16 to 32, and for mass markets, as many as 64 pages on a single sheet of paper, folded and cut, and then bound together with other signatures, and that becomes a book.
What a fun way to just think about a book.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
well,
so
one
analog.
signature,
I love
it's
it.
a chapbook.
Yeah.
And in this book from Percipri Press, which is called Making a Poetry Chapbook, I go into a lot of detail on
Making
how,
a poetry chapbook, everybody.
Right. I go into a lot of detail about how to make a chapbook and how that relates to a signature in book publishing. So I've got these other channels, these other outlets, which have been fun. The titles of these 2 Sinners in a Glass Ball are kind of fun. The first short story in there is called Moving Day in Creation. It's about a boy who finds himself alone on a farm when the beast of the apocalypse is making his approach after his parents have been taken up in the rapture and he's been left behind.
Yeah.
So it's called Moving Day in Creation.
That's great.
The second one, completely different, is called Standing by the Shroud of Our Lady of the Veil. Both of these were based in dreams, but the Standing by the Shroud of Our Lady of the Veil is about a really creepy art restorer who has run across this Renaissance painting, an unfinished Renaissance painting by one of the great masters. And he has this really creepy way of resolving what to do with this unfinished masterpiece, and it's kind of fun. So
These are beautifully designed too. You've got a thick stock on the cover. You've got a colored end paper that encapsulates the signature itself, and it's staple bound. That's a chapbook. It looks like it's like 4 by 5 or something like that.
It's basically just 10 sheets of paper stapled together at the corner.
And where do you produce them? Not that we need to go into the weeds of that.
Well, we for a long time did it all ourselves. We printed it off our home computer printer. We stapled.
See, you can do that.
We have a stapler that does this. In fact, this is my stapling. And then we would cut them laboriously with an X-Acto knife. I now am going up to the printer today to have, the rest of the copies of these trimmed.
It's a printer here in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
For about $20.
Cascade printing.
Cascade.
Oh, okay.
There you go. You got your call out, Cascade.
There you go.
Thanks for
We're in
helping
Cascade
Bob.
Township right now, I think. No, it's Ada Township.
They're over on Old 28th Street.
Yeah.
That's great.
So we used to do it all ourselves, but it's as time runs out in life, you are willing to pay people to cut your lawn instead of cutting your own lawn. You know what I mean?
I'm at that moment right
now. So that was the transition you're talking about. Just deciding I can do this myself.
Talk about community as you've done this. Have you been able? These seem to me to be wonderful things to read in public, or to be at conferences. We're going to see each other at the Festival of Faith and Writing later this month. It's now April here in Grand Rapids at Calvin University.
If I could borrow that back.
There you go.
There is a huge subculture of chapbooking in this country, and I confess that I am not a player in that. I know a few people. One of my favorite people I got to spend some time with on Achill Island.
Achill Island.
Achill Island off the eastern coast, western coast of Ireland. This man, I'm blanking on his name all of a sudden, but he publishes basically, this is a chapbook that's hardbound.
Right.
He does what he calls a visual poetry. It's all color.
That's your book, though.
This is not mine.
Oh,
no,
okay.
this is from a publisher called Red Fox Press in Ireland.
That's called Walter's Doolin.
And these are man's
pub drawings.
Quick pub drawings of people and musicians in pubs. And this guy, Red Fox Press, is just doing some amazing work, and I love what they're doing.
So in here, he's got drawings that he's made in pubs while listening to people play music.
And he and his wife, he has a younger wife, Korean, and they do all their own printing, all their own binding, everything themselves in this little quaint hut on Achill Island in Ireland, not far from where they filmed the Banshees of, what is it?
In Inish.
Inish.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the same place where they filmed.
Great movie.
Such a great movie. So that book goes with it. Definitely, just looking at it.
He did a book on the scenes from that movie where those were shot, and some drawings of some of the.
So you're talking about culture of chapbooks as you thought of this book.
Culture of chapbook.
Connections. With people.
There's some other people. I have some samples of some creative things people are doing just with paper.
Wow.
I
wish we were video.
This is a fold-out book.
You can see this.
Yeah.
I'm not into fold-out books myself, but this woman, again, who's
That's super cool.
Very skinny, creative fold-out book. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just fun.
This one got
probably handmade. Yeah.
This one folds out into a flower.
Okay.
They're more like art.
Yeah.
Rather than words.
Almost like an ornament. This one is.
And
creative.
you've already. This one is kind of cool. It opens 2 ways so that it's just wild.
Yeah.
See, this is why Sherry, my wife, wanted to hear from you.
Listeners, if you're listening, and I
stuff.
hope you are, just imagine crazy geometrically shaped books that your imagination could run wild with. And that's what these people have done.
Exactly. And you have already discussed, apparently last week, the zine culture, which is huge right now. It's a single sheet of paper You only need to print one side, fold it, and with one cut, you can literally make an 8-page magazine.
Wow.
They're called zines.
Yeah.
And there's a woman,
One piece of paper,
one piece of paper printed just one
like a
side.
thicker stock, and then
Exactly.
you fold it, and it really does look like a mini book.
And it doesn't need to be fancy. The woman online who is just kind of one of the great mentors is Bratty X Bree, BrattyXbre, at Bratty X Bree. She is the zine queen in this country, and she's doing some amazing work.
I've noticed on a few of these, like there's no author or copyright credit or publisher credit.
I know. I think they probably don't need to worry. As I tell poets, they say, "Oh, should I register my chapbook of poetry with the government?" And I say, "Who's honestly going to steal your poetry, and who's actually going to make money with your poetry?"
But even no website, to find out more.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking that's on purpose in a way. It's like it's part of the art form.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
And to bring it into the 21st century, here's a guy that does chapbook with
with a flash drive.
a flash drive attached to it.
That's more like the late 20th century flash drives.
Yeah, that's true. Well, this is current because it has the C.
Oh, it's actually
got the C plug for the.
it is. Look at that.
USB.
It's a
It's got both.
C.
USB-C.
So it's a little bit more.
I've never even seen a USB-C
It's got
flash
both.
drive.
Yeah.
See, I'm the one who's in the late 20s.
And I've never plugged it in to see what's on it. I assume it's just more information.
Relatively
about
inexpensive to put with your book. I love it though, because it does create a community of people who are just interested in maybe glorying in the obscurity a bit.
So you have all these by other people. Why do you have all these?
If I can make one
Yes.
kind of digression, I'll show you some more of our chapbooks. I did a series of 6 chapbooks for my wife.
I'm taking a picture that we'll put on the Substack.
Okay.
Good idea.
I'll take a couple pictures.
So, Sinners in a Glass Ball was one of our recent ones. I did 6 chapbooks of my wife's poetry, which turned into 3 print-on-demand books of her poetry.
Okay.
I think you'll like that title.
Title is When I Got Drunk with My Mother, Poems About Growing Up Southern by Shelley Hudson.
And
That's
then
great.
the title of the second book.
When I Smoked Pot with My Daughter. Now you're talking. Poems about parenting.
And this one just came out this week.
Rite of passage for every parent.
Yeah, whatever you love, you are. Poems about the rest of life. Oh, that's great.
So we kind of co-published those with the Schuler Books chapbook publishing.
Okay.
They print through Ingram Spark, who does a pretty good job.
Yeah, no, these look great. Glossy covers. Smaller. Probably still offset publishing, though. Or
Again, 2 more that just recently our Poughkeepsie Press published. Revisionisms, these are my translations of the last 50 years. I've translated poetry here and there.
Nice.
And this is, it's a trim sample, but Tristan Corbière was a Breton French poet and just the major poet of the century. I think he's better than Baudelaire and Rimbaud and Verlaine put together.
Oh, my goodness.
So those are just 6 of his poems. When he knew he was dying of tuberculosis, he wrote these poems to himself as a child who was dying.
Side by side with the French.
Yeah.
I love that, the translation.
So you can see how badly I did.
Come on. Now, I have to mention Nicholson Baker and his books. I'm forgetting the name of his character in these books, but the Anthologist is one I just listened to on audio. My wife and I are listening to these, but Nicholson Baker talks about poetry, and he's invented this character who is a professor and English. Well, just basically trying to create an anthology, and he's talking about all the ephemera and things that go along with writing that kind of a book. So I think you'd enjoy it, but.
Poughkeepsie Press?
Poughkeepsie Press.
Poughkeepsie,
Yeah. We chose that name because it is odd and people ask about it. It's based on the Latin word percipere, which means perception. And we had to spell it with a K because if you spelled it with the C as they did in Latin. Everybody said percipere press, and that just sounded, I didn't like the sound of that.
Percipere.
So percipere.
Percipere.
Press.
Percipere.
That's great.
That's very cool.
One of our best sellers, I mean, we usually print in issues of 25 to 50 copies. So, we're
There
not
you go.
talking bestsellers. Our bestseller has been this book called Bugs.
Bugs.
Which
I got a
is-
friend
I'm
who
getting
liked
pictures
that.
of all these books,
Oh, good.
everybody, by the way.
This is printed in a type font called Infestia,
Wow.
which is made up of bug parts.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, look at that.
The type.
Look at that typeface.
The typeface is,
Infestia,
Yeah.
wow.
which I can no longer find.
Sure.
We did 100 copies of this, and these have sold. I've only got about 10 copies left.
People are super into bugs.
Yeah, I noticed.
I know a group you could sell a bunch of those to here
Oh,
in town.
Well, I'll have to think about a reprint.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's
A cunning huntress in her own mind, the old cat stalks a ladybug.
Haikus.
That's one page.
yeah, they're all haikus.
So yeah, collection of 50.
I think
Bunch
there's
of
about
haikus in
20
there.
haiku in there.
Just
yeah.
called bugs.
Mine is the only candle burning at this hour. The bugs celebrate.
There's also the issue of one-offs, and this is a book
Okay.
I made for my wife. This is a unique copy. This
Oh, I
is
don't even want to touch it.
not in
beautiful.
an edition.
It's got a
Handmade bark,
box.
handmade bark paper in a box,
Wow.
and then it's a special craft paper. But these are again more haiku and drawings that I did for her.
Written in Japanese.
Yes, fake Japanese.
Oh, okay. I was going to say it didn't look like hiragana. I was. Yeah.
I think I copied them from somewhere, and these
Looks
are
good.
just English looking like Japanese. So, and I copied the images, but I hand copied the images.
Nice.
So the most
Oh,
passionate
wow.
traveler seeks that place most distant from himself.
Just that.
Mm-hmm.
Just that.
So this is
The most passionate travelers.
seeks that place most distant from himself.
So I feel this coming back around to what I was trying to emphasize about your curiosity leading you, your hyperfixations, the phases you go through. You have, I mean, I don't know how many books you brought. This is going to be a record.
Yeah,
Probably, at least 25 books here, maybe 30.
that you could put into a backpack.
That
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
hand sell to people, that you're allowing your interest to guide you and to guide you to the connections with people that you're looking to make, right? Using books.
Yeah.
That's a very different, let's say, business model
Mm-hmm.
than traditional publishing is set up to support.
That is. I'm not even sure it's a business model. 'cause
There you go. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
We've only just set up as a business.
Yeah.
I'm just doing this because I'm passionate about it. And since we were having a
Yes.
lot of money coming in, money going out,
Yeah.
we thought we would set up as a business. So we are officially, as of this month, as of last month, a business. One thing that comes up is you mentioned ephemera. I brought this stack specifically because I collect chapbooks as well. A beautiful one from Thich Nhat Hanh from the 1968.
That's amazing.
Wait a minute, that's from 1968?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And
Can you just hold it up? Vic?
Probably.
This is going to be an alternative podcast, everybody. You're going to have to.
We're gonna give you
you're gonna
pictures for
have
all
to
this.
get the pictures.
If you're,
yeah.
if you're
isn't
staying
that
with
beautiful,
us.
though?
It
It's
is.
just gorgeous. A first edition of T.S. Eliot's Cultivation of Christmas Trees,
Oh, wow.
which is a hardbound chapbook.
Hardbound, but tiny.
Yeah.
Look how
Maybe
thin
8
it is.
pages
Oh my goodness.
by Farrar, Straus, and Cudahy. Oh, that's even
Back when literary publishers did kind of fun things.
1956.
I want to be careful with these
I
things.
know.
Robert Bly was good at commissioning
yep.
small chapbook presses to do first editions of some of his poetry.
Sure. Okay.
I like the. This is the one that I'm showing Mick now is a Robert Bly book of poetry. It's bound
Wow.
in cardstock, but it's done like a dust jacket to a
Yeah.
hardcover.
Yeah,
It
it's got
folds
the-
over in the front.
It's got the leaves. So
You keep these in a fire-safe box.
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say, you're letting people
I don't.
handle these.
I
These
keep
are,
these in the barn. A second printing of the first edition of Jack Kerouac's
wow.
Scripture of the Golden Eternity.
Oh, my word.
These are valuable, Bob. Come on. Wow.
Where do you find these books?
I just browse through old bookshops. Used
Yeah.
bookshop just gets
You
my...
spend a lot of time in bookshops.
I
Yeah.
do. So, and there are just a lot of fun things here.
Little mysteries.
Using marbled papers, doing hardcovers. But it's what we've been calling the artisan book movement. It doesn't have to be chapbooks. It can be regular bound books. A lot of people are doing some really amazing things with larger books.
Yeah.
But these are artifacts that people want to keep. The content is beautiful,
Right.
and the packaging is beautiful. And
Yes.
that's something that you don't run into a lot, even with the major publishers. Sometimes they have attractive covers, they have catchy covers,
Right.
they have marketable covers, aesthetically pleasing.
Right. One extra process like
Yeah.
embossing or foil or
Right.
something.
But you go to an art museum, and there half of the paintings and drawings and prints and etchings you see there, you're going to go, that is so gorgeous,
Yeah.
that is so
Right.
beautiful. And you don't get that as you go to Barnes and Noble.
Right.
A lot. You do it sometimes, but these, you go to the old bookstores and you go, oh my gosh, I have what
Yeah.
I call 100-year books.
Mm.
That is, I go to the bookstores and I find books that are 100, 150 years old, and I think, wow,
Right.
people were doing such amazing things 100 and 150 years ago, and this book has lasted since then. How many books I worked on at Zondervan are going to be?
Yeah.
I actually,
They're not in a recycling bin somewhere.
when they went to the acidic paper, this was
Not that
back
I would
in
do
the
that.
yeah, about 20. I don't know if you were there, David, but they had to, for financial reasons, go to acidic papers because they had done non-acidic for a long time. And I gave my story about the 100-year books. I said, how many of the books I'm working on now are going
Yeah.
to even be here physically 100
Oh,
years
yeah.
from now? And I was told, 30 years is going to kind of push it. They're going to start yellowing. 50 years, those pages are going to start getting really brittle. You've seen, I have books, paperbacks especially, that are just yellow, and
Right.
Yes.
if you bend the page, it's going to break.
Right.
If I could just read a little piece. I'm
Please.
dominating
Please do.
too much. I'm
Yeah.
talking
No.
way, way too much.
No, this is a treat.
This is from the introduction to my Making a Poetry chapbook. Poetry chapbooks are experiencing a revival as a result of inexpensive digital forms of typesetting and printing. As in the 17th century, chapbooks are still the literature of the street. They are the people's voice, the sacred texts of the ephemeral, the pulpit of the church of what's happening now, the revolutionary's boombox, the mad poet's megaphone, and they make really nifty Christmas gifts.
Yay.
So that's from the introduction to Making a Poetry chapbook.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of this, I also have a book called The Art of the Almost Said, which is it's a full book about writing poetry. And these two came about. Art of the Almost Said and Making a Poetry chapbook came about because I would, as representing Zondervan, I would go to a lot of writers' conferences. And the most despairing people at the writers' conferences were the poets who were not writing very good poetry, who had no outlet for their voice. There were a number of problems. First of all, a lot of them were trying to evangelize through their poetry, which doesn't work. Poetry is not a good medium for evangelization, which I think has to happen face-to-face anyway. They had not read modern poetry. A lot of people writing poetry don't read contemporary poetry.
Isn't that interesting?
They have to do that if they're going to write contemporary poetry. So I wrote this one and the other one. This one to give them a voice. They can print their own chapbooks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then The Art of the Almost Said was a way to convince these writers that they needed to read more poetry. They needed to get out of this evangelization mode of poetry. I'm going to convert people through this poem, and it's just not going to happen. It was really sad to see. So, because people don't read poetry, Jack Lex's daughter tells that story. He told his daughter one time, he said,
Jack Black, you said?
Jack Lex, John Lex, he was
Jack Lex.
a poet.
Different guy.
Jack Lex, yeah. He and Lucy Shaw were kind of the major poets back in the...
Lucy Shaw just passed away.
Mm. So Jack told his daughter, he said, I'm really worried that I haven't mentioned Jesus enough in this new collection of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, oh, Dad, don't worry about it. Nobody reads your poetry anyway.
There you go.
People need to be relieved of that guilt. So
Yeah.
just do the poetry and then see what happens.
Well, what I say in The Art of the Almost Said is write your poetry to the extent that you yourself are covered by the Holy Spirit, to the extent that you are honestly indwelled by the Holy Spirit. Your poetry, whatever it is going to be indwelled.
It's going to come out.
If you try to make your poetry look like you're 1% more saintly than you are, it's going to come off as fake.
And we don't want that.
That performative word.
Yeah.
Performative is sort of the first stage spirituality, I feel, and then eventually you move on to stage 2.
I think it's a backwards stage,
and a third
actually.
stage potentially is, and a lot of people stay there for life. And yet, if you can dig in more deeply on your interests, let's say literarily, you're going to find a whole lot more stages there into your spirituality.
That's a question I'd like to ask you two, because you're the experts on this. The whole deconstruction movement was really a breath of fresh air and relates to a lot of what we're talking about here. But it's kind of hit its limit and is passing out of the scene a little bit. What do you find is the next stage? What's replacing it? Where's the culture going?
You remember. I don't mean to step on your toes
Please go
at
for
all,
it.
David.
Yeah.
This is. I love this conversation. To me, the emergent movement, if you recall, sort of nothing emerged.
Yeah.
We like to say, like, what was that? It was a blip. And I think similarly, our culture, and maybe even more quickly on deconstruction as a term, it gets thrown into the bucket with a lot of things like wokeism and, there's a lot of politicization that's happening
appropriated
right now.
by different
It gets appropriated.
circles.
Yeah. So I think it's still relevant. I think this is going to continue. There's just another term that we don't know yet. Deconstruction is useful because it does talk about deconstructing, or at least in my view, deconstructing the initial impulse, that first stage spirituality that's looking for a structure, looking maybe even ostensibly for a hospital. Let's call a church a hospital. People go in and they're looking for something. They may find it, they may not, but at a certain point you need to grow in your spirituality. We talk about discipleship and community, and in context of a loving community, you want to see a spirituality growing. A lot of people didn't find that. They found the opposite. They found trauma. And so the trauma is that's the word that I hear when people say they're deconstructing. Well, they're experiencing at the very least, mental trauma, if not also spiritual, emotional, relational. All of the ways that you can experience trauma is contained in this one word for people who have found a spiritual difficulty in their lives that creates this impasse. They can no longer either go to church, identify as Christian, talk to God, even pray. They don't understand anymore because what they were met with when they went in for a hospital was the opposite of healing. It was more trauma. And so that deconstruction then becomes something that they identify with. At a certain point, and you know this well, you're going to have to de-identify with that pain in order to release it and let it go. Because you see a lot of people holding up their pain as their identity. I have been hurt. I need to be comforted and heard by everyone in the room. And that becomes a very difficult conversation to have. People need therapy at that point.
Yeah.
But deconstruction will continue.
I had
whatever we call it.
A very relevant conversation about this with a potential author yesterday, who I won't go into all of it. I'll just say that they grew up in an environment that restricted this person. She's a woman, so it had that whole layer attached to it as well. Not allowed to go to college, for example. Had said some other things about that. I'm like, wow, that's really rich information, but about the experience. And, just being that more, like it was her version of being the submissive person. has done a lot of work on being critical and doing the deconstruction analysis and venting the feelings along with that. And, the conversation moved around to how are we growing? And it's, how do I become a person? Because I was held back from learning how to be a person. Let's just, for example, cultural references. Mm-hmm. When you're inside the Christian bubble, you don't actually know what's going on outside in the rest of the culture sometimes, which is a little weird. And this person talked about sort of having to come into her own again. And that's a very common theme going on in this movement. And people are kind of detaching from church. Church is changing. The framework of religion in the United States is changing. The relationship between institutional religion and being connected to something sacred is being redefined. Mm-hmm. But this person, and we talked, and I said, what's really missing these days, and I've said this probably right on this podcast, is what we're really missing these days are people who are going on this journey and exploring these questions, waking up in a way critically, and realizing, life isn't as it was. Well, what is life supposed to be? What life can I have? Well, who am I? Mm. And that's what, to me, I would love to see more of, is people writing beautiful things, beautiful collection of essays about how I discovered myself. Mm-hmm. I think back, I'm not a big literary person. I'm a psychology person, but I loved reading Annie Dillard. And she would write sentences like, I'm before God and I have to fall on my knees. Mm-hmm. Like, whoa, what does that mean? I have to fall. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing, but, or Barbara Brown Taylor, who's going to be at the festival later this month here. There's that scene in her first book, Leaving Church, where she's standing at the back of the Episcopal Church where she just gave a sermon, waiting to greet people, and she's just breaking down into tears and doesn't know why. Mm. I mean, I just remember being so moved and compelled by that. And I think that's what I would like to see is, I don't want another psychology subject matter expert. I don't want another, celebrity book. I don't want another really strong advice book. I'm tired of advice. Yeah. I want something that's going to move me, which you're doing in these chapbooks for sure. Mm-hmm. But that's where I think things need to go. Yeah. And I think, and we had a great conversation, this author and I hopefully she got inspired and encouraged to give her the freedom to not necessarily talk about that hard-hitting topic, critical topic, another book about Christian nationalism. It's like, okay, here comes another one. Yeah, we need to document all these things. We need to understand it. And that's and that's going to continue. Honestly, we're not done deconstructing until we're done deconstructing.
Right. Yeah.
But what I'm also hoping for is where can the beautiful writing come from? That feels spiritual, that feels like it's pointing towards something sacred without the usual evangelical tropes and so on. What can we talk about in terms of our own stories that is just noticing things, like an Annie Dillard was really good at noticing things. Mm-hmm. So that's my take.
That's
Sorry,
great.
that was a little long there.
I love it. Where's the question come from for you?
I worry and am challenging that inner voice from my evangelical days challenges me. Why are you writing about 2/3 of what you're writing? Because it doesn't seem to relate to faith. Mm. In my mind, it all relates to faith.
Right.
As you'll see, like in The Sinners in the Glass Ball, one is kind of ripping apart, is deconstructing that whole left behind end times mindset, sure, which I grew up with and I just have grown to despise. I hate to say it. Don't hate to say it, I say it. And the second poem is really kind of it gets much more personal, and I can't go into the detail about that. Sure. But it's a creepy poem. But both of them I define
it's spiritual creepy though.
On the back,
existential.
Yeah. I define both of those poems as stories about individuals dealing with spiritual life and death.
Yeah.
And because there is a kind of spiritual death that we're all struggling to keep away. I mean, I'm more afraid of spiritual death than I am of physical death.
There you go. There's your C.S. Lewis. Mm.
Yeah. So, and that's what the whole sinners in a glass ball concept is about. So, yeah, I raised in an evangelical church. My parents got religion late, only when I was in junior high school. I was one of those early converts, 1976, that thought you had to be conservative and Republican. Although I was reading a lot of Solzhenitsyn and Lewis and Chesterton and those kinds of people who were, Bill Buckley.
They've never fit well in that paradigm.
Yeah. And who are at least good writers. I mean, they're all really first-rate writers. But I finally had to give that up, partly through my wife, partly through just the disgust I was feeling with a lot of the pressure I was getting from our very, very conservative church where I met my wife, which was on the edge of being an abusive church, in my opinion. I won't name names. But anyway, so that's kind of where that came from. So helpful. I'm just freed up. The third poem in the Sinners series, which nobody's going to read, I'm venting. It's called the Milton Haiku. And it's about a scholar who's desperately trying to write a lecture on Milton and suddenly realizes that Milton was basically a contemporary of Basho, and how much he prefers Basho, and how much he really realizes he hates Milton, how much he thinks Milton misunderstands. Milton has this almost heroic Satan figure who becomes a romantic hero for the Romantics later.
Interesting.
And so anyway, I still have a lot of edginess about my evangelical upbringing.
Well, and I guess the disparity, right? Yeah. It creates a conundrum, and you have to explore it. Yeah. You have to figure it out. It's something that's in you that says, I'm not going to allow this to rest. I'm not just going to go to my office, make my money, and call it good. I'm going to actually explore what it is I feel my heart and my mind are telling me.
And the last poem in this set of 4 is about racism. It's called Shaving a Dead Man, about a white fiddle player in the mountains who's called upon to shave the body of his dead black friend and is therefore shunned from the local community for having befriended this guy and been part of the funeral ceremonies for this guy. And it's this old fiddler's reflections as he's dying on his deathbed. So it's bringing out a lot of the conundrums about race that I was raised with.
Fiddler in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
You said you worked for University of North Carolina Press. Is that where you're from?
I wish I could say I worked for University of North Carolina Press. I worked for the printing department, which published all the internal publications.
Gotcha.
I wish I worked for the press. No, I'm from Chicago. My wife is from the mountains of North Carolina.
Oh,
and that's how I ended up down there.
Appalachia. That's why you go there sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. We've got a place in Winston-Salem. Yeah. In Old Salem. And her family is down there.
But the fiddler, the mountain fiddler,
shaving a dead man.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an inside joke for fiddlers as well, because the original title of that tune was a very racist title.
Okay, that's great. Seemingly obscure. You're hitting on something that I think is a theme too. It's seemingly obscure to do chapbooks or to glory in the like nobody knowing your name necessarily. But that's what punk is for the kids. Yeah. They're calling this. And I think if you can make those connections, recognize that this is just the human spirit trying to survive. Yeah. In a digital world, that becomes life or death. That becomes existential. A lot of kids ultimately fall to despair because they don't find this sort of like what seems too obscure for them to even give credence to or start investigating. And if you don't investigate that, I think the soul starts to die. At least it decays. Yeah. And so we need to hold up the banner for digging into your interests, your hyperfixations, whatever those may be, and follow that heart, follow that mind's curiosity into that new frontier that you're too afraid to go into. Let's explore that together. It's okay. Other people have done it before you and will continue to.
Yeah. One final word is that I was asked to be one of the presenters at the last Chrysostom Society, and my presentation was on losing readers. I presented all the statistics for all the demographics that readership has gone down steadily,
Yep.
and it's miserable. It's like below 30% for the
wow.
teenage and under.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting really miserable.
Amount of time spent reading.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, and even the illiteracy rates,
Right.
the people that can't function at an 8th grade reading level as adults, is just getting really depressing. And so I asked the Christensen folks, what do we do? And none of us had really any
Right.
substantive ideas
Right.
on how we combat that. But that's why I go back. I know the rest of my life is just to be tending my own garden with these kinds of writings and publishings, getting as many of them out there as I can, and
Right.
maybe it catches somebody's.
Tend your own garden,
Yeah.
folks.
And you will, when you meet people, you give them books. I have books because we had lunch and you gave me books. Or
I wish I
you-
had brought you some of our chapbooks.
I'm good.
Hit me at the
We'll get there at
festival.
the conference
Yeah.
with your book. Yeah.
But you do it on a person-to-person basis. You show up at conferences, or just the one
Yeah.
kind of nowadays.
And now it's pretty much Calvin only.
yeah,
but
which
I
is only
used- I used to
every
do
other year.
more, yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could do more.
Website.
We're setting up a website now that we're an official business.
Gotcha.
So we will do that. But
Good.
But
Well-
your website personally is
yes, is up. It's roberthudsonbooks.com. roberthudsonbooks.com.
okay. And what can they find there?
They can find everything except the chapbooks.
Right. Right.
So we're going to keep the Poughkeepsie Press.
That's more person to person. You got to come to Grand Rapids and
Yeah.
meet Bob.
Yeah.
And then you might get I'll bet you'll get a chapbook.
You
But
will.
at least if you've listened this far, that means you need to get a copy of Martin Bonham. The Beautiful Madness of Martin Bonham is a wonderful book.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think it's going to do more. The story's not all told there. I think it's going to do more in future years as people start reading it. And it's the kind of book that you need to read. People, there's no such thing as Christian literary fiction because it's in my view, it's suppressed by the genre fiction. And if you can find some now and then, literary Christian fiction, it does exist. It's out there. Bob wrote one. It's really good.
That's where the word Christian is not a bad word in that sense.
Right.
Like, this is meant to be.
This is a category that's just
Right.
woefully underpublished.
Right.
Well, I'm hoping you'll find it really funny too, because that's mainly what people tell me is that they just laughed out loud frequently in the book.
Yeah.
One of the books that I've been thinking of doing, one of the larger books I've been thinking of doing, is basically kind of curious classics of the Christian faith, where I want to look at more of the humor, more of the, not light reading, but the accessible reading.
Right.
Like we were saying, nobody reads Paradise Lost. I mean, scholars have, your English lit majors have, they've read Paradise Lost. Who reads the Institutes?
Right.
You know,
cover to cover.
cover to cover. But there are a lot of fun things out there. Like,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to write that. So I went to a bookstore that specialized in Reformation literature. And I sat down with one of the managers and I said, what in this store is really funny, is really charming and kind of light and uplifting, but still really edifying? And the answer was, I'm afraid the reformers just weren't into that kind of thing.
Correct. There you go. It was just, I don't know. It wasn't seen as viable.
That's an
I
unfair.
suppose.
That's an unfair question.
Right. Yeah. Like,
It's a ridiculous question. We're not answering it.
Yeah, I hadn't meant to catch them off guard, but there it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So you do need to expand, reader or listener. I'm sorry, your listeners. You need to expand your interests. Allow those interests to expand you in return. And I think this is something that I'm going to come back to from this conversation. Thank you for being here, Bob.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I feel like
been
we
looking
could talk
forward to
forever.
this and definitely enjoyed it. Thank you.
You didn't get to your quiz.
No, let's skip it.
That's all right.
That's just back into like the editing stuff. But
Well, I am so
Yeah.
appreciative of everything you all do. You are doing God's work here in your podcast. And
thank you.
thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, well, we'll have you back. This is exciting. So, everybody, check out Bob Hudson. Look at the links below, and you will be able to find him there. Thanks for being here. Talk to you next time.